What's up, everybody? This is Sean. Let me come into the front here. I don't know if the title was proper there. Something weird happened. But anyway, we're gonna get started. Is the title good?
Just as each lyrics is like.
Yeah. I tried to do a practice thing, and then, anyways. So today's subject is going to be momentum. I'm going to talk about momentum. Also, if anybody else gets on here on this live stream and wants to make a comment, or even just a comment after if you're watching it, and just for something to talk about, definitely let me know. I'll talk about anything pool related or not. Pretty much everything can be pool related, really, in my opinion. There's analogies to most of life that you can use pool as your backdrop as a simplified version. So momentum, from a physics perspective, momentum is just a mass moving at a velocity. And I think when we kind of relate that to pool, there's a lot of different kinds of momentum that are happening. My specific kind of like thought in my mind that I had was that I talk about momentum of a match in a competitive sense. And I think I'll just begin with that, and then we might move beyond that if we have enough time. So basically, I think if you think of the way that a pool match, say, we'll just create a little structure here. So say you're playing maybe like a race to 7 rotation or 8 ball, it doesn't really matter what the game is necessarily. But something that has enough time going on, an hour and a half, 2 hours might be a little bit long. An hour and a half definitely will have enough time for like some ebbs and flows. And I think that, yeah, so that should be good. Race to 7. So the way the match starts is there's no momentum, so to speak. Now, if you take a step back and you're in a tournament, now if this is the first match of the tournament, and now your first match and your opponent's first match, there's truly not necessarily in a momentum of the tournament. Now, if you had practiced beforehand or whatever, that starts to zoom back, and you start to see a little bit more about how momentum works. As far as there's different kinds of momentum going. We're just going to speak about the ebbs and flows of the tournament. So if you're beginning of the match, no one has any momentum, score 0-0. So I think that everyone starts to see that if an object is in motion, it tends to stay in motion. That's what the momentum is. So your objective is when you're playing a tournament is to keep your score going up and keep that trend alive and keep that momentum going. And at the beginning, you have enough score, so you're beginning, and then your opponent is not going to necessarily agree to your tactics. They're going to try to win as well. So now you have this push and pull going on where there's a struggle for momentum. And a really good thing to, sorry, I lost my train of thought there. A really good thing to keep your mind on is, sorry, Vic just left really quickly. I think the car alarm. I forgot what I was saying. So the tournament is, first match, no momentum, score 0-0. There's no momentum. Your objective is to get something going. So if you have an open run out, to get momentum, you just need to run the balls out. And I think that if you understand and you think about the game in terms of momentum, then you can kind of become a little bit more objective about what's going on. And then you can then start to play with the momentum as being one of the ways that you use as a tool to win, is to understand the momentum and use it better than your opponent. So in this situation is that the earlier you can identify and get some momentum going, the better. And in order to make an object start moving, have a little bit of a narrative that allows you to gather some momentum, which is that at the beginning you're just like, you know, I'll be successful if I recognize if I have any feelings of anxiety or nerves early on, using my mindfulness activities to keep myself in the present moment, so that when I have an opportunity to start to establish some momentum, then I'm going to take advantage of that opportunity, be ready for that. So you're kind of, in a sense, getting your priming the pump of momentum in your favor. And say, for instance, you have a setback. Say, you know, your opponent misses and leaves you really tough, and now, you know, you're not quite sure if you're going to be able to execute the next shot. It might be extremely low percentage or difficult. There might be a lot of things going on. Maybe there's nothing that you can really do to force your opponent into a really bad spot. You're just kind of hoping that something good will happen. That happens situationally. It's very important that those moments when there's a real opportunity for a shift to happen, that you're in control of, to understand that that's what's going on, and that you need to like see those moments when they're coming, and then apply the amount of energy that you need to shift the momentum in your favor, so that you can get the ball rolling, so to speak, and then eventually have the clear momentum in your favor, so that you can hopefully ride that all the way to the completion of the match. Now, if you start to gather some momentum, it'll display itself kind of in a few ways where it seems like you know, maybe even if you're missing balls, if you have the momentum, it seems as though sometimes, like, well, you're playing two-way shots and you're staying in control of the game, and then your opponent is constantly in situations where they are having difficult situations come up and they're not being successful as much as you're being successful, as far as dictating your narrative and saying, I am actually in control here. I have the momentum. I have positional advantage. I have the score advantage, and I'm using that to the maximum effect to put further pressure on you, to keep you down, and to keep my momentum going, to hold your momentum at zero if possible. And that's what you're trying to do. And then if you're on the other side of that, where you're feeling like you don't have the momentum, it's your focus is to stop the momentum of your opponent. First off, you got to slow them down, and there's a lot of ways that you can do that, you know, most of which rely on you executing a strategy, you know, to help help your cause. You're not gonna be able to stop your opponent necessarily from running out. However, you can play the game in a way that limits their ability to run out so easily, and to make, you know, each situation that they're encountering a little bit more difficult when you have an opportunity to do that. You know, when you break the balls, you know, if you make a ball in the break but you don't have a good shot, maybe you'll make a ball, but then, you know, position is a little bit dicey for the next shot. Maybe you ought to play the defense instead, to try to force your opponent to make a mistake instead of you making that ball and putting yourself in a position where you're going to lose momentum if you're making an unforced error, even if the error itself was just like going for a shot that's a little bit too low percentage, instead of forcing your opponent to go for that shot instead. You know, with the opportunity, of course, for your opponent to play a different shot as well. And that's where you start to understand the momentum is like, well, I'm going to try to get you off of your game through my tactics of play, and you're going to do the same for me. And if you're understanding that there's that push and pull going constantly, then now you're less falling sway to the, you know, the nerves and all that, where it's like, you know, that the reason why you're feeling pressure in this situation is because the momentum is in your opponent's favor and not in yours, and that you just need to adjust your narrative and realize that I need to put energy forth here to try to shift and make my opponent believe that I could actually win, and that they're not actually supposed to just run me over right now like they've been doing. You know, that I'm going to show up for my life here, and I'm going to make a good shot, and I'm going to run out and play tough and solid, and show them that it's not going to be so easy. You know, that I'm not here to just let them win through me making repeated mistakes, and then they just pick up the pieces that I'm actually going to run out. I'm actually going to play safeties and proper and make everything tough for them the whole time. And that they're really going to have to show some skill in order to beat me. And that's constant narrative enforcement as far as like that's how you continue to keep the momentum. It doesn't matter whether or not your opponent's playing great. As long as you keep your ball rolling and you keep yourself moving at a certain velocity, is like I'm ready to do these things. When it's my turn, I'm going to shoot the shot properly to help myself gain momentum, continue to keep momentum, and to reduce my opponent's momentum, or to get something started for myself, and just understanding where you are in the momentum cycle, so to speak, because it's like either you have full momentum, your opponent has full momentum, or you're in between, or you're, maybe at the beginning, it's like a tug of war. If you're constantly making good choices and proper strategies and higher percentage plays and reducing your opponent's percentages through your own thoughtful play, then you're going to shift the momentum as far as your own momentum, your own confidence in your favor. Now, if your opponent sees what you're doing and understands it as superior technical play, then it might take them from a mental situation, a narrative where they were like, well, I can beat this guy, to like, this guy's never giving me anything, and he's running out every time I miss. Now, everything is tougher, and now you see how that is actually your own like strength of what you're doing is actually its own momentum that reduces your opponent's momentum automatically through having a little bit of a question of whether or not they're capable of doing the thing, even though there's no one stopping them from shooting the shot. It's just by being forced to be repeatedly thinking about the consequences for what you're doing and how you might have to pay the max price every time you make a mistake, because your opponent is constantly making good decisions that help them shoot easier shots and that make you shoot more difficult shots. Is that you can see it over time, the war of attrition is going to be that it's likely, unless you really battle hard and tough and like really use a lot of energy, that a superior tactical play is how you continue to keep momentum, not so much through repeated like strength and effort, but just through understanding the ball wants to keep rolling, and by choosing certain plays, you can move the ball the way you want it to go, just like in pool, where it's like, well, if I put my cue ball here instead of here, I have a better opportunity to run out, and that actually is how I continue to keep my momentum. I don't force myself to shoot shots that are going to stop my momentum, and because I'm going to be ahead of the game, and I'm going to see where we're going next, and I'm going to be ready for that, and then that I'm going to be able to flow into having an easier decision constantly, because I've been working hard from the beginning to just continue to keep this situation managed and keep my own momentum going, because as you zoom out from one match, now you have a good successful match where, you had, maybe it was a struggle at the beginning. It doesn't even matter the narrative so much. It's like anytime you can come out of a match feeling like you gained from the experience, you're adding momentum to what you're doing. So even if you struggled early on and then maybe you just barely got there nail biter, and came with it at the end, at least then you can say, well, I had to struggle hard, I battled hard, and I ended up getting it. I could have played better, but as things tend to go for me, over time, I start understanding, the table is playing a little bit different than I'm used to, and that I just need to see the differences, and then I can adapt to that. And then now you're creating momentum that's going to last through potentially from the set. You gathered momentum in the set, and now you're going to take that momentum and you're going to build on it into the next set, and you're going to continue to do that. And then now, if you're using tactical plays and strategy to keep the momentum going, it's going to be much better than if someone else maybe they have momentum, but they're applying constant energy to it through, drinking lots of caffeine, or maybe they got, drink a beer every set or whatever, or, in their mind, whatever it is, they might be adding their energy to it, but they like play the game in a energy to that fire to keep that ball rolling. So you got to find a balance of like, well, how much ball rolling do I really need to do here versus running after it because I've kicked it so far down the road that I have to chase it. And now I'm going to get tired. It's more about being in control of the ball, keeping the momentum going at a pace that you're comfortable with so that you never get out of control of it. It always is just continuing doing that. And that's how, even if you lose, you're just like, well, I'm not losing momentum here, even if I lost the match, because I've learned from that experience. And then I can use that to increase my, my strategy, or maybe I have a couple of shots that I shot that I wasn't familiar with that I'm like, oh, these are coming up, and I'm seeing that. I need to work on that, and now you have a thing that you can do to keep the momentum going, where you're like, well, at least I'm improving from this experience because I have something to take away from the loss. There's no real losing if you're learning. So those are the types of things. And in a tournament, you want to be able to have a conversation about how you're doing everything that you should be doing to get yourself into a successful winning position, hopefully be poised to, go to the end of the tournament or to the end of the match with a feeling that you deserve to be here because you're playing proper and you're doing everything the best you can do and you're learning from the experience as well. And that's really a big thing about momentum is just like, if you feel like you don't have momentum, then you just gotta be like, well, I need to put some energy forth to get some momentum, and then I gotta start trying to decide, okay, what does momentum sound like when I talk about it, and then start talking about it like you're trying to either gain some momentum or you already have it, and that you're just keeping the ball rolling, and it's not so much that you're like putting the initial energy forth, but you're just using enough to maintain what's already a working situation where the ball's moving on its own now, and I just need to massage it, kick it to the side, and just keep it going the direction I want versus constantly having to redirect and use too much force here and there. And that's the center project of learning how to have your momentum the way you like it to be, and then keep it going, and not have crash and burn, and then have to like recover and then get back in the game. Maybe you gotta take it easy for a little while. And this is about pool too. It's like you can't just think, oh, I can just hit balls for 8 hours a day for a week, that's going to make me a better player for the rest of my life. Maybe it will, hopefully it will. That's all cool. With that being said, it might be better long term to take those, those hours and split them up into a more reasonable program that would help you advance over time and not be so immersive, and then potentially, having to recover from the experience for too long to really gain maximum benefit. To me, a little bit of like targeted practice is really all you need to get better. It's just a question of like how often can I do targeted practice, so that I can then learn one shot a day, and then I'm playing, many days a month, so that I can then practice many shots a month and not have to do many shots in one day, and then be super tired, and then maybe not have gotten as much out of each shot because I was, at the end of the session, maybe you get fatigued, and now each rep is worth less benefit than it could have been had you just taken more time scheduling your life, which is part of the momentum too, is that, a lot of people, they get tricky with pool, and, they go hard for a long time, and then they get burned out, and then they take breaks, and then the accumulation of those breaks over time, when you really take your eye off the game, you go to do something else, and you do not think about the game. It's different, like, if you're, like, continually being immersed in, like, well, I love pool, and I will watch people play pool, and I will, watch instructional videos, and I will do all of these things, and then I get to play pool once a week, and then in that one day a week, I put in max, and I try to get the most benefit out of it that I can, and that's as much momentum as you can really get right there, and then hopefully later you can make some changes to going on with your schedule to add an extra day. And but then, you're not completely taking time off from it like you would do. So I'm done with it. I'm not gonna hit balls at all for a month. And you go take a vacation, and then you come back and you have not even thought about the game. And then you basically lost all momentum, and now you got to start the ball rolling again, and that takes energy. And that energy ultimately is the question is that actually efficient use of that extra energy is to continue to keep this ball rolling and then let it die off and then pick it back up and roll, or should you just let it roll slower and then just be a little more momentum, so then you have like a tortoise and the hare situation coming up, right? So you got to find your own momentum, your own way to ride the game, play the game, and then use that to help you form a narrative that will help you be successful. And then it doesn't matter so much what everybody else is doing. You're not going to think, oh, okay, this player is advancing faster than me. Over the course of a few years, you'll start to see that there's going to be players that are getting better faster than you are, or you're getting better faster than them, and you'll start taking notes of that. It takes a long time for that accumulation to come up, where, after 20 years, you start to see where guys that you felt like played at your speed, maybe don't play as good as you do now because you've put more time in over the years than they have, and it's just created a little bit of a separation in skill. And, as we're all like have choices where it's like, well, if you like more than just pool, then it's going to be tough to be really great at pool, because in order to get good at something, you have to spend time being aware of all the things, So I think that's pretty much my momentum conversation. Has there been anybody?
There's two people watching, but
Yeah, so take a second to thank our sponsors, Tibbetts at Fernhill, Clean Sight Pool Tables, and Brunswick Billiards. Again, if you guys are interested in this content you've made this far, the school group we're using as a platform to help educate people, and also, we just want to appreciate everyone once again for supporting in any way you can. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already. And if you want to have any of this content be tailored to your specific desires, then just leave a comment about something that you have a question about, or that you're not sure about, or you want me to voice an opinion about, and I'll do that for you. You just have to, put the words in and hit enter. And with that being said, I hope you guys have a great day, and we'll see you next time.